Big world.
What I want and how I want.
My name's Brandon and this is Cartoon Network Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Cartoon Network franchises and retrospectively review them. Get the kids out of the pool because this week we're heading to Adult Swim to review Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am, a game that is going to continue the trend of ridiculous titles and concepts that Johnny Bravo began last episode. Zombie Ninja Pro-Am was released on November 5, 2007, exclusively for the PlayStation 2. It was the first and only Aqua Teen game and the very first game based on an Adult Swim property. There have only been 3 other games based on Adult Swim shows: Harvey Birdman Attorney at Law, which I'm reviewing quite soon, Pocket Mortys, and Virtual Reality. Adult Swim actually ended up opening their own publishing branch as Adult Swim Games, but for the most part their games haven't been based on pre-existing properties. The game was developed by Create Studios, who have been around since 1995, but this was their very first time developing something based on a Cartoon Network show. Far more interesting though is that Midway Games were the publisher. If you played video games before the 2010s, you definitely know them. They had a hand in creating Cruisin' USA, Galaga, Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam, and Rampage. Their catalogue of iconic games is a veritable laundry list. In February of 2005, Midway acquired the rights to publish games based on Adult Swim shows, and they didn't waste any time. They immediately announced that they had plans to produce games based on Aqua Teen, Harvey Birdman, The Brack Show, C-Lab 2021, and Space Ghost Coast to Coast, with more to come after that. It also seems they picked up the rights to produce games for select Cartoon Network franchises such as Ed, Edd and Eddy, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, and Dexter's Lab. The future of Cartoon Network games seemed bright, however they would only end up publishing Grim Adventures, Aqua Teen, and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Imagination Invaders, because by the beginning of 2009 they ceased to exist. Bizarrely, despite announcing their intentions to make a Harvey Birdman game, the Harvey Birdman game that came out was released by Capcom. The story around Midway is too complex to get into here, but basically the short version is, in 2008 Midway lost $191 million. This combined with Sumner Redstone selling his 87% stake in the company caused a domino effect, which resulted in Midway filing for bankruptcy on February 12th. Warner Bros. Purchased most of their video game licenses, but the Adult Swim and Cartoon Network licenses seemed to be ignored by outside companies. God, what I'd give to somehow see what games were in the pipeline when Midway shut down. There are potentially early in development games based on Ed, Edd and Eddy, Dexter's Lab, The Brack Show, C-Lab, and Space Ghost that nobody is ever going to see. As for this game though, it fared poorly with critics. It has a 42% on game rankings and a slightly lower 37 on Metacritic. This is actually one of the rare games that I've reviewed so far that has a decent amount of reviews available. IGN, AV Club, and 1UP all gave the game a 5, GameSpot gave it a 3.5, GamesRadar and the official PlayStation magazine gave it a 2, and I'm not really sure what Game Revolution is, but they gave it a 0. The reviews seem to think this is either a middling licensed game or the worst thing they have ever played. Aqua Teen Hunger Force is one of my favourite shows of all time, so there's a lot to live up here. Ooh boy, I cannot wait to jump into this.
Aqua Teen Hunger Force, #1 in the hood, G.
The opening title screen of Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am is the perfect snapshot of what this game is. Your first reaction to seeing it is probably going to be remarking about how incredibly low budget it looks. To fans, this is the developers nailing the aesthetic of the show. Aqua Teen is known for its use of lower quality effects out of both necessity and for comedy. However, to the casual or non-fans, this just seems like something ripped out of a PS1 game and not a title that was released in 2007. And honestly, both of these points of view are correct. Zombie Ninja Pro-Am nails the aesthetic of the show, but it's also of poor quality. Let's start with the positives about the game before I have to tear into something based on one of my favourite shows of all time. The premise of Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am is that Frylock gets into the Jersey Pines Golf Club, which sees the gang heading out for a round of golf. Yes, that means that this is a golf game at heart. You might also fight through waves of enemies, but the crux of this game is you playing golf. While this seems like an entirely bizarre premise for an Aqua Teen game, it's exactly something you would expect to see in the show, and that's because this game was actually written by the show's creators. Matt Malaro and Dave Willis wrote the story for the game, and it tells. I would honestly consider this the funniest video game I have ever played.
Just urban golf course.
What does it say?
Ah, junk mail.
What does it say? What did it
I
say?
hate this stuff.
Did I get in?
I'll take care of this for you. Don't worry.
Open it, Shake. Open it.
Hold on. I have to open it first. Dear Frylock, we are coming to hurt you. You are rejected because you are a red gay ass.
If you removed all of the gameplay elements and just strung together all of the cutscenes, you would have a genuinely great episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force. We've seen a number of examples in Cartoon Network video game history where games have nailed the feeling of the show, but this is the first time where I can say that this is literally indistinguishable from the real thing. Unfortunately, there aren't any subtitles present in the game, so it makes it a little bit hard for me to show off the writing without just presenting to you entire cutscenes. I highly suggest seeking out a long play of this game and just skipping to the cutscenes. This is one of the rare times where a video game has consistently made me laugh out loud.
Yeah, maybe that's why it's called ass.
Is it really called ass?
I don't know. I'm just shooting my mouth off over here.
His dad can get you kicked out of here, Shake. He does own a dealership.
No one's kicking me out of anywhere.
You've also got cybernetic ghosts of Christmas Past from the future and Scott Van Pelt of all people on commentary. Generally, they only show up at the beginning of a new hole where you're shown the layout of the course. Usually I would immediately be mashing the button to skip a course overview, but here I enjoyed the banter between the two so much that I willingly sat through the entire thing each and every hole. Because the game is written by the show's creators, it is so densely laid with references to the show's first 4 seasons. Essentially, if you see something in this game, there's roughly a 90% chance that it's something that appeared in an episode previously. Remember Meatwad's imaginary friend, Boxy Brown? He's here. The Enchiladito's brand of chips that gives Meatwad 2 tickets to the Super Bowl? They're here. The sword from Moonmaster, Fargate, the Gorgotron? They're all here. Of course, you also get appearances from fan favourite recurring characters like the Moonanites and the Plutonians. I absolutely love this as a die-hard fan of the show. Everything in this game has been included to put a massive smile on the faces of the people who watch the show. As an added bonus, you get 4 episodes of the show to watch with the game. I can imagine this was a massive thing for fans at the time. From memory, none of the games I've reviewed so far has offered even a single episode. Heck, I reviewed Johnny Bravo last episode and that only offered extremely short clips, so 4 entire episodes is huge. I also think the Aqua Teen gang looks fantastic in 3D. They just have naturally transitioned into this style, and not once did I think they looked out of place in a 3D world. This was one of my biggest concerns based on the way the show is animated, but to my surprise, this was never even remotely an issue for me. The game sounds like an absolute dream at the moment, doesn't it? Well, disappointingly, this is as far as the positivity goes for Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am. The biggest issue is that the gameplay is just no fun whatsoever. While the bizarre title and wacky premise would make for a good episode of the show and leads to a lot of hilarious moments, it doesn't make for a game that's fun to play. As I mentioned earlier, this is quite literally a golf game. You're occasionally tasked with doing a couple of other things, but at the end of the day, you're always playing golf. The golf mechanics are extremely basic. You'll simply need to time the power and accuracy of your swing on a meter. Once you've done that, your ball will go flying based on how good your timing was. While that initially seems quite easy, I quickly found that you need to have perfect timing most of the time. Going just a tiny bit too far left or right with your timing will see your ball going nowhere near where you wanted it to. Similarly, overpower your hit by a fraction and the ball is going to go flying past the hole and out of bounds. Obviously, there needs to be repercussions for not timing your shots well, but I don't think you should be skewing your shots so badly for such minor errors. Courses contain your typical golfing hazards like sand traps and water, which is where your balls will end up a lot if you don't master the swing mechanics. They really went to a fair bit of effort committing to the golf game gag. You quite literally have a selection of clubs to choose from. You've got your driver, wedge, putter, and that other one that I can't remember because I don't play golf and I never use it in this game. Personally, I never found any reason to use anything other than the driver and the putter. Every single hole consisted of me smashing the ball until I got to the green, where I would then putt. When putting, you'll occasionally have to deal with mini-golf-esque obstacles. These can be very basic scrolling obstacles like the Moonanites throw out, or trickier ones like the portals used by the Plutonians. At the end of each hole, you're given a literal score on a proper golf scorecard. This is pretty funny the first time you see it, but as far as I could tell, getting good scores didn't actually matter.
You know, Homer, the traditional way to cheat in golf is to lower your score.
That's one way.
In between Master Shake's wild golf swings, you're tasked with fighting off enemies. As you would expect, all of these enemies are references to the show. The combat is actually what makes this game last longer than 30 minutes. If this was just a pure golf game, you would just breeze from start to finish. Combat is relatively basic. One button attacks while another blocks. Here you can switch between Master Shake, who is a melee attacker, or Frylock, who is a ranged attacker. For some reason, Meatwad isn't really present here except as an ability pickup where Shake can use him as a decoy. Your movement is so stilted and results in your battles consisting of little more than you running up to the enemy, mashing the attack button, and then moving on. As I mentioned, you can pick up power-ups. These generally give you a one-hit kill ability against certain enemies for a limited period of time. They're convenient, but not even remotely necessary considering how easy the game is. In between shots, you're tasked with defeating every enemy before you're allowed to take another swing. Well, technically that's the case. I found that if you just sprint to where the ball landed and kill only the enemies that show up directly on your minimap, you're actually able to progress. Discovering this was a godsend, as mashing the attack button non-stop was extremely dull, and levels just throw ridiculous amounts of enemies at you. At the end of a course, you'll either navigate one of those mini-golf style obstacles or fight a boss battle. Calling them boss battles is a little disrespectful to actual boss battles, but I digress. The first of these is against Carl, and boy does it suck. When he first pops up, you'll start attacking him, but soon realise he has an impenetrable defensive shield. This led me to believe I needed to parry his shots or something. I continued to do this to no avail until I eventually realised that you need to let him attack, run away, and hope he falls over. Then you can start mashing your attack. Do this a few times and you win. It's just such a poorly designed boss battle, and there's zero enjoyment to be found here. I also fell through the level here, which didn't do the boss battle any favours. It seems they didn't have many ideas for boss battles, because when I reached the Gorgotron, you essentially have the exact same fight again. The only thing different this time is that you need to grab some repellent to make him go to sleep. Once asleep, you mash attack again. Do this a few times and you win. The combat gameplay is no good whatsoever, but it actually isn't the worst gameplay element present. That prestigious honour goes out to the kart racing segments. Yep, this game also has kart racing alongside everything else. In 3 of the 12 levels, you proceed to race in a golf cart around a course against the frat aliens. I thought the racing controlled rather well, so I was optimistic when I started my first race. This optimism was torn to shreds about 2 minutes later. This is the world's most bland and boring kart racing. It's a 1v1 race every single time where the only items are a single homing missile and a speed boost. Races are 3 laps where you need to pass through checkpoints. Tracks are also extremely long and aren't that varied, so you become bored with what you're doing a single lap in. And good lord, the rubber banding in these segments is by far the worst I've ever seen. You will quite literally be neck and neck with your opponent for the entire race. This means if you fuck up even slightly in the final 30 seconds of the race, you are screwed and have flushed 4 minutes of your life down the toilet. There was one case where, by some sort of divine intervention, I managed to get roughly half a track in front. I thought there was surely no way they'd catch up if I continued to race well, yet somehow they caught up almost immediately. I'm not exaggerating even slightly when I say this is one of the least fun things I have ever played in a video game. Earlier I mentioned how the characters translate well into 3D. While this is true, graphically I find everything else about this game to be rather ugly. For a 2007 game, these environments are just downright dreadful. There are PlayStation 1 games that look better than this, which is insane considering the PlayStation 3 was on shelves at this point in time. There are also some really weird moments in cutscenes. In the very first one, Carl peeks through a window which just looks fucking awful.
The course.
And pay for it? I don't think so.
Hey, what are you doing?
Our next lesson.
I heard a smash, and I know that it was my house.
Carl also looks absolutely minuscule in that cutscene too for some reason. Unfortunately, these kinds of animation quirks are just poor rather than being charming like the actual show is.
Aqua team. My name is Shake Sula, the mic Sula, the old Sula. You want a trip? I'll bring it to ya.
Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am is such a letdown. It's got all of the heart and soul of the show, but none of what makes a video game enjoyable to play. I don't know if I've ever seen the humour and DNA of a show transition so well into a game before, but without the gameplay to back it up, it's still a mess. It honestly feels at times like the insane amount of references is a distraction from how bad the gameplay is. The game also majorly suffers from not picking a single gameplay style and sticking with it. I know they were trying to match the zany nature of the show by being able to say this is a golf ninja kart racer. That's all well and good, but if none of those things are fun to play, it's all for nothing. If they had just picked one style and focused on doing it well, this could have been a genuinely memorable game. Why not just go all out in creating a mini golf game? Feature a bunch of locations from the show, and there you've got your game. Hell, making a genuine kart racer could have been a great option. You have at least half a dozen extremely popular characters you could have used, and the driving here actually isn't too bad. Instead, Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am ends up being a golf game where you sprint to your next shot, briefly fight some monsters, and then do the most boring 3-lap race ever. It pains me to say it, but this game is a genuine dud.
Ball is in. Parking lot. Would you like to play again? You have selected no.